All right, welcome back to another installment in our series on the Mivtzaim, on the mitzvah campaigns that were established by the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And we want to again take the opportunity to remind everyone that this campaign or this series of learning about the mitzvah campaigns is dedicated, both the study as well as all of the mitzvahs that come from the study are all dedicated Le'ilui Nishmas, for the ascent of the neshama of Dina Leah Bas Menachem Mendel, as well as David Lazer ben Yosef Shleiman. We should have that in mind when we're studying tonight, as well as when we're implementing what we've studied. Tonight's class is about Mivtza Torah, the campaign to promote the study of Torah. And when we made up the calendar at the beginning of the year, we were deliberate in choosing this campaign for this time of year because we are right now in the days before Shavuos, the Yom Tov of Shavuos, which is the anniversary and the reliving of the revelation at Sinai. On Shavuos, we commemorate, we give thanks, we relive the experience of God giving us His law, revealing His will, His innermost will to us in the form of the Torah at Sinai 3,333 years ago, I think it is now. Someone can do a calculation. What's 5781 minus 2,448? I think it's 3,333 at this point. So as we're preparing now, and today is Rosh Chodesh Sivan, this is actually the date when the Jewish people arrived in the wilderness of Sinai, where the mountain, Mount Sinai, is located. So we're really in a time where the energy that's available in the world right now, the energy that is active right now, each of these days, is an energy of receiving the Torah. So we couldn't think of a more appropriate time to discuss this subject. We mentioned before that some of the campaigns of the Rebbe were sort of rolled out unofficially. I think they call it nowadays in marketing a soft opening, before it was made into an official campaign. And that's the case with Mivtza Torah. Mivtza Torah became one of the official Mivtzaim in the summer of 1974. We spoke about, in conjunction with other mitzvah campaigns, how the Rebbe was reflecting after the Yom Kippur War about the services that were provided for the soldiers, and that they required spiritual inspiration. And that's sort of how some of the Mivtzaim were launched, was in conjunction with supporting, giving moral support to Israeli soldiers. And by the way, we should mention right now that this learning and everything that comes from this learning is something that increases the morale and the courage of Jews everywhere, but especially our brothers and sisters in the Holy Land. Not to mention the spiritual effects that this study has on bringing merit, which shields all Jews everywhere. At any rate, so that was the summer of 1974, but there was actually a soft opening, so to speak, of Mivtza Torah on the 15th of Shvat, what many people refer to as Tu B'Shvat, the Rosh Hashanah Leilonis, the New Year for Trees. So in the year 5731, that's Tafshin Lamed Aleph, which is the winter of 1971, January, February 71, the Rebbe announced as man darf einnehmen die Welt durch Limud Torah, that it is now the time to conquer the world through the study of Torah. That through spreading out Torah study, encouraging people to study Torah, we are going to transform this entire planet into a perfected place. And the key is this campaign. So let's talk a little bit about the transformative effects that Torah study has. And also let's talk a little bit about how the Rebbe wanted this campaign to be implemented. There's a story of the Alter Rebbe, the Baal HaTanya, the first Rebbe of Chabad, that he met with one of the leaders of his opponents, the Misnagdim, named Rabbi Yeshua Tzeitlin. And he was one of the Ge'onim of Shklov. Shklov was a bastion of Hisnagdus, of opposition to the Chassidim. And one of the things this Rabbi Yeshua asked the Alter Rebbe is, there was a popular misconception that Chassidim didn't study Torah. And then there's a reason, like most stereotypes, even when they're wrong, they're based on something, right? It was a misunderstanding. But, long story short, really, really short, is that the Baal Shem Tov stressed taking down the walls of division between the scholars and the simple people. But in many circles, that translated to a perception that Chassidim were anti-intellectual or weren't scholars, which was not true. But at any rate, so during this debate in Shklov, so Rabbi Yeshua Tzeitlin asked the Alter Rebbe, what's with the Torah study of the Chassidim? And the Alter Rebbe says, I can assure you that the Chassidim have kviyos itim l'Torah. Kviyos itim means set times or appointed times, established times. To be koiveya means to fix or to set something, make something firmly established. So this Rabbi Yeshua says to the Alter Rebbe, well, we have that too. We also, that's a normal Jewish thing. Kviyas itim l'Torah is a normal thing. So the Alter Rebbe said, yes, but there's a difference between the time being established, right? Being koiveya, establishing it in time, or being koiveya, establishing it in your soul. By us, by the Chassidim, when a chassid has a set time for learning, it's not established in time, it's established in his soul. And that is one of the keys to Mivtza Torah. It wasn't just a campaign to promote study of Torah. It was a campaign specifically to promote being koiveya itim and not just setting a time that's set on the clock or the calendar or your reminder on your phone, but set in your soul. What does it mean a time is set in your soul? It means that your study session, your daily, or actually, ideally it's supposed to be a twice daily study session because once in the morning and once at night, is established in your soul. It becomes unthinkable to live without it. Like people who they go to the gym and if they miss going to the gym, it's just unthinkable. First of all, they wouldn't miss. But if they would miss, I'm in an awful mood because I didn't go to the gym today. I missed my appointment, which obviously is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. But we should be that way with Torah study. And the Rebbe spoke about it in a very practical, very accessible way, very attainable. The Rebbe said, look, the point isn't, at first at least, when you're easing into it, that you got to make long study sessions. That's not the point. The point is that it should be regular, and it should be, you shouldn't miss. So the Rebbe spoke about it at a Fabrengen and said, if you start with, I don't remember if the Rebbe said 5 minutes, But certainly it was a short amount of time. It was at the most, I think that it was at 15 minutes. But it could, if I remember correctly, it could have even have been 5 minutes. The Rebbe said, make it a short amount of time, but make it something that's firmly established in your soul, something you wouldn't think to miss, something that becomes an organizing principle of your life, where you have to fit everything in around that. And furthermore, the Rebbe spoke about, what does it mean qualitatively? Because there's quantity and there's quality. Quantity is you're learning hours a day, which, by the way, I know to some people that sounds like learning hours a day of Torah. Yeah, I mean, that's actually not such a wild thing to have several hours a day. And I'm not talking about somebody in Kollel who's a full-time scholar. I'm talking about a working person who has responsibilities. But, they go to a beis medrash in the night and then they study for 2, 3, 4 hours on top of a full-time job. Why not? But I don't want to intimidate anyone. Let's start off with just saying, okay, put aside the quantity. We'll do a minimal quantity, 5, 10, 15 minutes. But let's talk about quality. Okay. What does quality mean? The Rebbe said that when you're studying Torah during your set time, it should be to you like Shabbos. What does that mean? It means somebody who's Shabbos observant. If the phone rings on Shabbos, it's not that you reach for it and then you stop yourself and say, oh, I'm Shabbos observant. It's that it doesn't even register for you. It's like it's so completely off your radar. I mean, you're aware that there's this noise, but it's not relevant to you because, look, whoever's calling me, if they know me, they're not calling me on Shabbos, right? So that is supposed to be qualitatively what our set times for Torah are like. What does it mean that it's set in your nefesh, that it's set in your soul? Not just that there's a time and you keep the time and you show up on time and you don't finish earlier and you don't start later, which of course is important as well. But what does it mean that it's really affirmed in your soul? It means that during that time, if the phone rings, it's as relevant to you as if it were to ring on Shabbos. The Rebbe actually says that when it's very interesting, the picture that Rebbe paints, you could totally imagine this. That if a person is at home, let's say, and he's studying Torah, and at first his family is not going to really respect those times. I mean, they support it, it's very nice, but they're going to want to come over and talk to him and interrupt him. And I mean, obviously, if it's a life and death type of thing, like on Shabbos, you would also interrupt for life and death. But barring that, you can't be interrupted. So the Rebbe says his family at first, they're not gonna have those boundaries because they're not used to it. They didn't see him doing this before, and they're gonna interrupt him while he's studying. The Rebbe says, but if he shows that these times are sacred, that nothing else, I mean, obviously, if while he's learning Torah, he's also like texting people from work and setting up tomorrow's business deal, then please don't expect your family to revere your set times because you're not revering them. But if the person will show that these times are sacred, inviolable, like he will not do anything to besmirch the integrity, whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, but during that time, nothing can interrupt. Then not only will his family respect that, but the Rebbe says the family is going to start protecting him and they're going to keep away any interruptions because they're going to see how serious it is and it'll become part of the rhythm of the family. It'll just become how the household runs. That during these times of Torah, nothing, if the phone rings and one of the kids answers it, no, I'm sorry, my father's not available, right? What do you mean he's not available? He's not available. He's studying Torah. He's not available. So that's the main idea of Mivtza Torah, is this creating sacred times with a deep soul connection to those times that we do not violate. Now, let's speak a little bit more about what the Mivtza entails. And then I want to get back to, like I said before, Einem and Develt durch Limud Torah, conquering the world through Limud Torah. Why is studying Torah so transformative? What is transformative about Torah study? So we'll get to that, Mivtza Hashem. But I want to speak a little bit more about the campaign. The campaign also, like all of the campaigns, is about influencing others. So it's not just setting up my sacred times for Torah study, it's also encouraging others to have such times. All of the Mivtzaim are that way. They're all about influencing others. So how is that implemented in this Mivtza? So you know the famous saying, it's one of, probably, I don't know, did I do a survey? I don't know, but I would guess that it's one of the most famous quotes of the Rebbe, which is, if you know Aleph, teach Aleph. So where did the Rebbe say this? The Rebbe said this in conjunction with Mivtza Torah, with the Torah study campaign. The Rebbe said that a person might think, well, I'm no scholar, so how am I going to go influence other people to study Torah? I have no Torah to share. So, like, basically, I have no part in this campaign. So the Rebbe said, first of all, who says that you have to be the teacher? Maybe you can be the marketing, you can be the promoter, the carnival barker who gets the people to come into the tent. You don't have to be the one who actually performs, the rabbi who gives the shiur. You could be the one who gets people to the shiur. Although, by the way, I want to just take this moment to play both roles. Shavuos, Sunday night, right? We have a custom to stay up all night studying Torah. So I want to invite everybody. I'm going to promote my own shiur right now. I want to invite everybody who is in Five Towns for Yom Tif, or if you're not in Five Towns for Yom Tif, maybe you'll make a point to come into Five Towns for Yom Tif, to come join us for all-night Torah study. We're going to be learning Torah all night. We're going to have some exciting topics. I think we're starting at 11:30 p.m. and we're going to be going basically till dawn, 4 or 5, whatever it is. And I'm sure just the promise of Torah study is enough to attract you all. But we're going to throw in no extra charge. There's going to be a sushi bar as well. So come join us for a sushi bar and refreshments, and I'm sure it'll be social over there. It'll be nice company, and I'll be teaching some classes. We'll change up the topic every 45 minutes to an hour. We'll come out with a list schedule for the all-night Torah study. Anyways, if you want more information on that, go to chabad5towns.com/shavuot for more info about that. We're going to have an amazing time. Okay, so that's the end of our commercial break, right? That's a word from our sponsors. But back to our regularly scheduled program. So first of all, a person is going to say, well, I'm not a scholar, so how am I supposed to participate in this campaign? So the Rebbe says, well, first of all, who says that you have to be the one who's teaching it? You could be the one who's promoting it. You could get people to come to a class. But second of all, don't think that you have nothing to teach. That's not true. You have something. Maybe you only know one chapter of halacha, but you could teach that chapter of halacha. And maybe you only know an aleph, but if you know aleph, teach aleph. So that's where that famous saying from the Rebbe comes from. Don't sell yourself short. Don't assume that you have nothing to offer in the realm of Torah study. Whatever it is that you do know, go ahead and start sharing it now. So That's an important message, I think, for all of us. I mean, look, you're at this class right now, so you heard what I just said. You learned something. If you knew nothing else other than what I was just teaching just now, you would have what to teach. And, just don't tell anyone about the link after we post the recording. Then by the way, you could do that. I give you full permission right now to take any of my classes. You go to soulwords.org and you could take any of my classes and you could steal it word for word. You could take the jokes, you could take whatever you want, and you could do it all without giving me any credit. No problem. I'm very, very happy for everybody to do that. The point is, everybody can be a Torah teacher. If you know something, teach that thing. Okay. I want to talk a little bit more now about the transformative power of Torah study. What is transformative about Torah? It's interesting that David HaMelech was a warrior and a king and a poet. But first and foremost, David HaMelech, King David, was a Torah scholar. And Torah study was his foremost passion and love. And some of the poetry that, I'm talking about the Psalms, the Tehillim, that King David writes are poetic ways of describing his love of the Torah. And one of the things King David says, very lyrically, is your Torah, he's speaking to Hashem. He says, your Torah, Hashem, is in my innards. What does that mean? Your Torah is in my innards. I mean, if I were to associate Torah with a body part, I would say your Torah is in my head, in my cup, in my brain, my mind. But why is it in my tummy, my innards? I mean, my kishkes. Like that's where you put Torah. So in the Holy Tanya of the Alter Rebbe, Perek Hey, chapter 5, he explains over there what that means. In Tanya, one of the key themes there is the idea of behavioral perfection. He talks about the Beinoni, who's conflicted because he has a Yetzer Hara, he has selfish impulses, but he focuses on his behaviors, on the perfection of his behaviors. And he calls them levushim, clothing. And the point there is that when you do a mitzvah, you engage in a behavior, it's much easier to change your clothing than it is to change your body, right? So to change your impulses, your hardwiring, the way you think and feel, that's really grueling long-term work. But just to get dressed nice and change your outfit, that's not so hard. And that's basically the metaphor. It's an extended metaphor in Tanya about focusing on behaviors. Just change your clothing, change the behaviors, change the outward expression. Is that called hypocrisy? Maybe it is, but it's a very noble thing to be a hypocrite in that case, in that context. It's like, act better than you feel, do better than you feel like doing. And that's very noble. At any rate, so there's a lot in Tanya about levushim, about clothing. The behaviors are like clothing. Okay. And then in chapter 5, he says, but just like there's soul clothing, there's also soul food. What is soul food? Soul food, I know, is like collard greens, but I'm saying like Jewish soul food. Oh, Nederlach. No. I mean, as opposed to the garments of the soul, what is considered the nourishment of the soul? So here's what the Alter Rebbe says in Perek Hey of Tanya, that if the mitzvahs are like the clothing of the soul, then Torah study is like the food of the soul. And here's why. Because when you put on a nice suit and you look nice, when you come home and you take it off and you put on your pajamas, and now somebody comes up to you and says, let's take a picture. Well, don't take a picture, man. I'm in my pajamas. No, but you were wearing your suit tonight. Yeah, but I already took off the suit. Don't take a picture of me now, right? When you're wearing the nice clothes, you're wearing it. As soon as you take it off and you change, you're no longer wearing it. So when you're doing a mitzvah, you're doing it. But once you're no longer doing it, okay, you got to get busy with the next right thing. Contrast that with food. Food has a lingering effect. Food's effect lasts long after you engaged in the behavior, right? You put on nice clothes, but no one can see that you were all dressed up earlier tonight when you already, changed into your pajamas. But if you go and you eat the cheesecake, then, it could be days, weeks, months later, and you're carrying it around with you. You can tell that you ate that cheesecake. I ate the cheesecake. It took me 10 minutes to eat that cheesecake. And now it's months later, and it's still recognizable on me. The point is that we're not casting aspersions on cheesecake, by the way, because Shavuos is coming up. And and did I mention there's a sushi bar at the All Night Learning at Chabad of the Five Towns? Yes, there is. Okay. The point is, Torah study has a lingering effect. It's like food that you eat it, you digest it, you metabolize it, and it becomes part of your flesh and blood. When you're doing a mitzvah, so you've done something good. But when you study Torah, not only are you doing something good, which is called Torah study, and it's a mitzvah to study Torah, but it has the added advantage of it's rearranging, rewiring the way your mind works. Like when you're eating and the nutrients from the food are becoming part of your body. And that's what's transformative about Torah study. And you can understand very well then what we're saying about if you have 15 minutes of Kviyas Itim, you have this sacred time, 15 minutes a day, but that time can have an effect long after those 15 minutes. Just like, you spent 15 minutes, eating cheesecake, and it has a long-term effect long after the 15 minutes are done. When we study Torah, it doesn't just help us occupy our time well for the 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour that we're studying. It does so much more than that. It's how that hour of Torah study will affect my thinking days after the study session is over. Because that's really what Torah does. Torah is not just knowing facts. It's a way of thinking. It's a value system. It's a viewpoint. And it colors the way we experience everything in life. So when you start studying Torah, it changes the way you see everything. It's not just you are studying Torah, but Torah becomes your way of thinking. And in that sense, it's extremely transformative. There's a discussion in the Talmud about whether a Torah scholar is allowed to forego the honor due to a Torah scholar. There's an obligation to honor Torah scholars. So the question is, can a Torah scholar say, I forgo that. I'm not going to be particular that people have to honor me. So the discussion in the Talmud goes like this. Well, there's a verse in Tehillim, in Psalms, actually the first chapter of Psalms, which we said today being the first day of the month of Sivan. It says, B'teres Hashem cheftzei v'yega b'yemim v'layla. That, uveseirasei yega yem v'layla. That he desires Teiras Hashem, the Torah of Hashem, and in his Torah, Yegi Yem V'Layla, he meditates day and night. So the Talmud says like this, very interesting. His desire is Hashem's Torah. It's talking about a person. A person desires Hashem's Torah. He wants to learn Hashem's Torah. And in his Torah, he meditates day and night. So Talmud says when he wanted to study, when it was his desire, it was Hashem's Torah. B'teres Hashem cheftzei. But when he actually studied it, when he meditated in it day and night, uveseirasei, in his Torah, his doesn't mean Hashem's Torah, his means the person who's studying it. His Torah, he meditates day and night. Because what happens? You actually transfer ownership of the Torah. When you wanted to study, What does it mean I wanted to? I wanted to. I didn't. I wanted to, right? Then it's Hashem's Torah. But when you actually put in the sweat equity and you meditate in the Torah day and night, now it's an acquisition. Like literally, like when you eat food and then you metabolize it and becomes your flesh and blood, it becomes you. So when you sit and you study Torah, whether it's for hours or it's for 15 minutes, you make an acquisition. It becomes yours. You make a kinyan in Torah, an acquisition where this becomes yours. There's an ownership. There's an ownership. I'm not quoting anymore. I'm not telling you what the good book says. I'm telling you the way I think, because that's the effect that Torah study has, that it becomes my way of thinking. It rewires my brain. So therefore, the Talmud says, yes, the Torah scholar could forgo the honor due to him. You know why? Because he owns it. If it were Hashem's honor, who are you to forgo Hashem's honor? But at the point where he becomes a Torah scholar, meaning he put in the time, he put in the effort, he internalized it, he owned it, now it's his. He can do whatever he wants with it. Very powerful concept. That through Torah study, we can take Hashem's perspective. Think about this. Torah is, like the Zohar says, Histako baraiso boro alma, that Hashem looked into Torah and created the world. Torah is the blueprint for creation. Torah is not a reaction to the conditions of the world, like man-made laws come and they legislate how to deal with the conditions of this world. Torah is the exact opposite. Torah created the conditions of this world because Torah existed as Hashem's will and wisdom for an eternity before the world existed. Yes, we speak about Torah existing 2,000 years before creation, but obviously we're not talking temporally because it was before creation, before time was created. It's not just 2,000 years, it's really eternally, because ultimately Torah is one with Hashem and Hashem is eternal. So the Torah is eternal. So what that means is, think about this, try to fathom this, that Hashem gave us a way to internalize infinity. That's wild. That a finite mind of a created being should not only be able to have a relationship with infinity, but I should be able to put the infinite into the finite, that I should take Hashem's infinite will and wisdom in any form and be able to put it into little old me. It's mind-boggling, and yet that is precisely what Torah study is. Torah study is the transformation of a finite being into an infinite being. When we study Torah, we learn Hashem's perspective on the world. And that's why, by the way, a lot of people speak dismissively sometimes about certain areas of Torah study where they say, well, that's not very practical, or it would never happen. It's one of those, really far-fetched cases that the rabbis invented in the Talmud, and so what's the point of studying? It's not relevant. And here's what you have to understand. The Alter Rebbe says this in chapter 5 of Tanya that we were quoting before. Even if a case were never to come to pass, ever, meaning if it never actually happened, it doesn't matter, because the fact that you know that if it were to happen, this would be Hashem's opinion in that case, and now you have that as your viewpoint, that makes you godly. That's becoming godly. Now you are looking at something the way that the Creator looks at it. So whether or not you'll ever encounter it in real life, that's a bonus if that happens. But just being able to think about an idea from a godly perspective, that's an amazing gift that we were given. And then obviously, when it comes to the things that actually do come up in life, a Torah scholar, and when I say Torah scholar, I really mean all of us to some degree. Like I was saying before, everybody has what to teach. A Torah scholar is somebody who has godly perspective on all matters of life, whether it's education or marriage or business or health or politics, whatever it is. Torah gives us godly eyes to be able to look at life. So it's not just when I look at something, it's me as one created being looking at another created being. When I study Torah and I know Hashem's viewpoint, now when I look at things in this world, I'm able to look at a created being from the perspective of its creator. That's amazing. So you understand very well then why Torah study is so transformative, or how Torah study is so transformative. And if we can spread that perspective to the entire world, and we can give people that godly perspective, then, that's world peace. Then we've solved all the problems. So, I think that's something we can all meditate on as we head into Shavuos and Zman Matan Torah. Let's all think about ways that we can practically make Torah study in a fixed, established, cherished part of our daily routine. Let's think of ways that we can bring that to others and involve others, whether it's by teaching them or setting up a study partner, making a chavrusa every day. That's a very, very powerful thing for both people, for both study partners. Or if it's just promoting a class, letting somebody know about a class, or letting them know about this series, or whatever it might be. Or, today with the internet, you find a nice link and you send it to somebody and you say, hey, watch this class, watch it on double speed if you want, and then can we make an appointment tonight at 11 p.m. after the kids are asleep to talk about that class for 15 minutes, right? And you make a regular thing out of that. Whatever, I don't have to give you suggestions. You guys are industrious, you'll figure it out. But that's the gist of it. Okay, I'm going to wish you now the traditional well wishes that we all in Lubavitch customarily say on Shavuos and the days leading up to it. The wishes of Kabbalah Satera, B'simcha Ubepnimios. May you receive the Torah with joy and inner depth. Truly, truly internalize it, own it, make it yours. Okay, we'll see you, God willing, Sunday night if you're here in the Five Towns.